let's see. We've got Patrick calling from Washington. I think we should do this one next. Patrick, you are live on Talk Heathen. What's going on?
Hey, how's it going?
Going pretty good. How can we help?
I just wanted to respond to the poll on the chat about whether or not Christianity is a peaceful religion.
Yeah. What do you think?
I think it's a complicated question. I would say historically it has not been peaceful, but I think it's important to look at the actual doctrine, like what actually teaches, rather than whether or not Christians historically have been peaceful. Because obviously they have not been, but.
Yes. You know what, Patrick? I agree with you. You're right. We should look at the doctrine. Like the verse we read this morning, Jesus came to bring the sword, right? He came to separate his father from son, from daughter, from mother. So yeah, I agree with you. We should look at the doctrine. Christianity definitely sounds like a pretty violent religion, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm joking with you here, Patrick. I'm being facetious, okay? It is complicated, right? Like, look, yeah, obviously there's very peaceful Christians. There's Christians who have done horrible things. When you have a religion of billions of adherents, you're going to have like a spectrum, right? Yeah. But like, I'm not particularly interested, I'll be honest, Patrick, in saying what the true theology is to me or what the true doctrine says. Because like, honestly, like that doesn't matter. What matters to me is, okay, are the claims that they're saying true? Like, is Jesus like this dude that rose from the dead? Is God real? Did he come to save humanity? Because like, if he's not those things, anything he has to say about morality, I can take with a grain of salt like I can with anybody else that's written about morality, right?
Yeah, and the thing is that when people want to say, well, you're not, a true Christian is a peaceful person,
right,
kind of thing, Christianity is peaceful, I have trouble with that because in my lifetime, a pub in my hometown was bombed by Christians fighting other Christians. Like the Troubles in Ireland were not a long time ago.
Yeah.
Sectarian violence was part of my upbringing.
Yeah.
And you say, well, no, we're a religion of peace. I'm like, evidence sort of says otherwise, Chief.
Sure.
Yeah. Can I respond to the?
Of course.
The verse that you brought up?
Absolutely.
Because I'll say for myself, like, I've always been, like, in my own family, I've always been the one to kind of hold my tongue to keep the peace. And so, like, my whole life, I've always felt like my family was together, and like my parents aren't divorced, and I've never really fought with my sisters, but I don't know, like, so there's been like this appearance of peace, but now that I'm like, now that I reflect on it, like, I held my tongue, and some, like, I don't know, like it wasn't good for me to do that, like.
Sure.
Because I really suppressed myself. So,
Patrick, do you still identify as a Christian now?
Yeah, I was an atheist for about the last 7 years. But I think as I've been realizing this stuff, I've been like questioning what exactly love is, and like everything that I thought was love growing up ended up not being love. Like I know my parents love me, but like in another sense, like I sat in front of a screen for like more than half my childhood. Like, so like, is that really love to let your kid do that? Or like, and that's affected me in ways that has like really hurt me.
Yeah.
And so
absolutely. Neglect is a thing, right? Neglect is a thing that can be harmful for people's upbringing. And unfortunately, in my opinion, Christianity doesn't really address a lot of that. In fact, it does even tell you, like, you should ignore, I mean, it literally says, not just in the verse I read, but in other places in the New Testament, that you should ignore your family obligations in order to be one with Christ, like follow that understanding. And this is a religion that has expanded and evolved its theology for over 2,000 years. And so different Christians in different times and places are going to have interpretations. But at the end of the day, at every single instance where an interpretation has happened, it's always a person at the other end of that, right? And so my criticism, Patrick, and one of the reasons why I don't call myself a Christian anymore is exactly by what you've described. My sense of morality, I don't get it informed from the Bible at all anymore. My sense of ethics, my sense of what I think is right and wrong is coming from what I believe other people want for themselves and what I want for myself. And okay, like how do we meet that compromise, right? Like that's pretty much what ethics is at the end of the day, right? And like, there's things in the Bible specifically, in the Christian religion, that holds me back from being able to love other people the most way. If I listen to what the Bible has to say, I would have to tell my LGBT friends that they're living a life of sin and that they need to repent. And I don't think that's loving.
They're evil and broken things,
I don't think they're actually doing any harm, really, just living their lives and loving who they want, right? And that's one example. But you can see how, as I have growing up as a Christian as well, Patrick, I've also struggled with this idea of what did my Christian friends and family really mean when they talked about love? Because that is, I think their definition failed, to be honest.
And to kind of bring it back to the original question of like, is Christianity a religion of peace or peaceful? I think the wider question might be, is any religion, especially dogmatic ones like Christianity and other Abrahamic religions, can they be peaceful? Because they are prescriptive.
Sure.
You live this way, you follow these rules, and you believe what we tell you to believe. And if you disagree, we're going to have problem.
Right.
And that brings conflict.
Right. And if it's not people giving the violence, it's God, right? It's God saying, no, vengeance is mine. That's literally a quote from the Old Testament, right? Hell is the consequence for disobedience. Which isn't supposed to be pleasant, So
there's conflict and strife all the way through religion in general, but Christianity in specific, at least from where I'm sitting. And while it does have messages of peace and love in there that can be interpreted in ways that are more positive, it's kind of like, why follow an instruction book where 75% of the instructions seem bad and 25 are okay?
Yeah, I agree. Why not just have a better instruction book? Or maybe we don't just have one book. Maybe we have a library of books, right? I don't know. That we're talking a lot here, Patrick. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, so before I was an atheist, I started going to a church that kind of ended up being like a cult, which is what led me to being an atheist.
Sure.
And then so what brought me back was really learning about how my actions are affecting my life and like what I was living for. I do want to like talk about what you said about loving who you want, I guess.
Yeah.
Or not. And not specifically about LGBT, but what I learned for myself actually came from a Slipknot song. Vermilion.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I'm familiar.
I'm a 90s kid. I was well into all that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Vermilion actually like changed my life with this because like my whole time in high school and stuff, I always loved that song. And recently I looked up what it meant, and the commentator said it was either about his struggle with drugs, or it could also be about a trauma bond and how like someone can like become who you want them to be, and then and then he mentioned how like that can often does lead people to suicide or like being institutionalized, because it is like a in a way a drug addiction, and the reason why I related this so much is that I was in a trauma bond, and I might be now too. Like, and so, my girlfriend in high school did take her life. And I know I'm not like the main cause. Like I think the main cause is from her own family, but
yeah, Patrick, I appreciate you sharing this. This is obviously an extremely impactful thing, and I'm honestly I'm flattered that you would tell me that and tell Jamie that. I think that speaks a lot to your trust in our abilities to help you with that. But I think what you're talking about now, I think you're venturing into a territory that unfortunately I can't actually comment or even help you on, because I'm not a licensed therapist. I have no background in doing that sort of thing. So I think the kind of issues that you might need help addressing need to come from a professional and somebody who really knows what they're doing, and not two goofy talk show hosts. Right?
I mean, we empathize, and it is brave for you to share that.
Absolutely.
But for many reasons, ethics chief among them.
Well, I'm not looking for help with it.
Okay.
So
I wanted to like relate that to what that has to do with Christianity in a way.
So,
okay.
I mean, are you saying that you're finding comfort in religion?
No.
Okay. No.
It's actually like almost the opposite.
Okay. You're saying like are you making a comparison that like your upbringing with Christianity is sort of like a trauma bonding experience? Is that kind of the analogy you're going for? I'm just trying to understand.
No, I think I'm trying to point out how what like Christianity has pointed out that has kind of shed the light on what like it's like everything I thought in my life was good ended up being like off. Like I don't know, like it shed light on what the reality is in all this stuff. Like, and so yeah, I think it's been rather difficult to not comforting at all to be realizing these things. It's almost like I was living in like this state of denial. Like,
well, we can recommend things like Recovering from Religion and things like that. There are great organisations out there that can help you untangle these emotions from the experiences that you had. And
right,
yeah, because it sounds like there's a lot in there, man, and you've gone through a lot. And we are not qualified, nor would we want to dissuade you from anything that's going to make you happier and healthier. We just encourage you to seek.
But the point of that is that showed me how sin does result in death, like, and
right.
Why.
So I was afraid that this was like the conclusion of like where this was going, and like again, I can't advise you on what you should do with your life, but my opinion is that worldview is harmful, and the reason why that worldview is harmful is because sin as a concept is extremely ambiguous, not very well defined, and tends to do a lot more harm, in my experience, and the other people in this building's experience, than it does good. Yeah. And part of that is because it doesn't seem to address human interests. It seems to address God's interests. And how we know God's interests is from human interpretation. And when human interpretation is involved in that process, it gets messy, right? And it gets arbitrary, and it can get really, really bad. So like I don't ascribe anybody to look at their life in how they are, and if they're right with God or not, if they're living with sin. I really, my point of view is you should look, are you making yourself happy and the other people around you happy, and are you doing what's best?
And I think we could both give examples of people we know who have found happiness in sin,
right,
by the sort of biblical or dogmatic version of it. What you're saying is like bad actions or bad decisions can lead to bad consequences, of course, but they're not necessarily sins.
Right. It's one thing to take responsibility for your own actions, right, and being accountable to that. That's a great thing.
Yeah.
I totally advocate for that. I don't advocate for doing that within a sin construct or a sin model, because, again, it's arbitrary, it's ambiguous. I don't think it's helpful, and if anything, it's caused people to have a lot of issues within themselves that they've had to resolve after they've left religion, because it's so deeply ingrained into some folks' psyche. But look, Tyler, we do have to let you. I'm sorry, not Tyler. Patrick. Tyler was our last caller. Patrick, we do have to let you go because we are running a little bit low on time for this call. Okay. But I do appreciate you calling in and sharing your perspective. But I hope what we said makes sense in regards to why I don't like when people say, "Oh, I realized like I was a sinner."
I was a sinner. I came back to religion because I really realized I was a sinner. And I'm like, and again, we can't really unpack that from a professional level. I would just say that seek out people and maybe even seek out secular help. But take care of yourself, man. Yeah,
whatever you're going through, whatever you're like working through with that, like I hope you find help that you need. And I'll leave it at that, right?